Hello everybody. Today I'm gonna read Ruskin Bond Getting Granny's Glasses. Chapter 1. Granny could hear the distant roar of the river and smell the pine needles beneath her feet and feel the presence of her grandson, Money. But she couldn't see the river or the trees, and of her grandson she could only make out his fuzzy head and sometimes when he was very close, his blackberry eyes and the gleam of his teeth when he smiled. Granny wore a pair of old glasses. She'd been wearing them for well over 10 years, but her eyes had grown steadily weaker, and the glasses had grown older. They were now scratched and spotted, and there were very little things that she could see through them. Still, they were better than nothing. Without them, everything was just a topsy-turvy blur. Of course, Granny knew her way about the house and the fields, and on a clear day she could see the mountains, the mighty Himalayan snow peaks, striding away into the sky. But it was felt by Money and his father that it was high time Granny had her eyes tested and got herself new glasses. Well, you know we can't get them in the village, said Granny. Money said, "You'll have to go to the eye hospital in Missouri. That's the nearest town." "But that's a 2-day journey," protested Granny. "First I'd have to walk to Nain Market, 12 miles at least, spend the night there at your uncle's place, and then catch a bus for the rest of the journey. You know how I hate buses. And it's 10 years since I walked all the way to Missouri. That was when I had these glasses made." "Well, it's still there," said Money's father. "What is?" "Missouri." "And the eye hospital?" "That too." "Well, my eyes are not too bad, really," said Granny, looking for excuses. She did not feel like going far from the village. In particular, she did not want to be parted from Money. He was 11 and quite capable of looking after himself, but Granny had brought him up ever since his mother had died when he was only a year old. She was his nanny, maternal grandmother, and had cared for the boy and father, cows and hens, and the household all these years with great energy and devotion. Even her failing eyesight hadn't prevented her from milking the cows, or preparing meals or harvesting the corn. "I can manage quite well," she said. "As long as I can see what's right in front of me, there's no problem. I know you've got a ball in your hand, Money. Please don't bounce it off the cow." "It's not a ball, Granny, it's an apple." "Oh, is it?" said Granny, recovering quickly from her mistake. "Never mind, just don't bounce it off the cow. And don't eat too many apples." Chapter 2. "Now listen," said Money's father sternly. "I know you don't want to go anywhere, but you're not sending you off on your own. I'll take you to Missouri." "And leave Money here by himself? How could you even think of doing that?" "Then I'll take you to Missouri," said Money eagerly. "We can leave father on his own, can't we? I've been to Missouri before with my school friends. I know where we can stay. But—" He paused a moment and looked doubtfully from his father to his grandmother. "You wouldn't be able to walk all the way to Nain, would you, Granny?" "Of course I can walk," replied Granny. "I may be going blind, but there's nothing wrong with my legs." That was true enough. Only the day before they found Granny in a walnut tree, tossing walnuts not very accurately into a large basket on the ground. "But you're nearly 70, Granny," said Money. "What has that got to do with it? And besides, it's downhill to Nain." "And uphill coming back," Money reminded. "Uphill's easier," said Granny. Now that she knew Money might be accompanying her, she was more than ready to make the journey. The monsoon rains had begun, and in front of the small stone house a clutter of giant dahlias reared their heads. Money had seen them growing in Nan and had brought some bulbs home. "These are big flowers, Granny," he'd said. "You'll be able to see them better." And, and she could indeed see the dahlias, splashes of red and yellow against the old stone of the cottage walls. "Looking at them now," Granny said, "while we're in Missouri, we'll get some seeds and bulbs, and a new bell for the white cow, and a pullover for your father, and shoes for you. Look, there's nothing much left on the ones you're wearing." "Now, just a minute," interrupted Money's father. "Are you going there to have your eyes tested, or are you going on a shopping expedition? I've got only 100 rupees to spare. You'll have to manage with that." "We'll manage," said Money. "We'll sleep at the bus shelter." "No, we won't," said Granny. "I've got 50 rupees of my own. We'll stay in a hotel." This is the end of our part 1 story. Hey guys, and welcome back to Mibary. Today I will be reading Getting Granny's Glasses part 2 from chapter 3. Chapter 3. Early next morning, in a light drizzle, Granny and Money set out on a path to Nairn. Money carried a small bedding roll on his shoulder. Granny carried a large cloth shopping bag and an umbrella. The path went through the fields and around the brow of the hill, and then began to wind here and there, up and down and around, as though it had a will of its own and no intention of going anywhere in particular. Travelers new to the area often left the path because they were impatient or in a hurry, and thought there were quicker, better ways of reaching their destinations. Almost immediately they found themselves lost. For it was a wise path and a good path, and had found the right way of crossing the mountains after centuries of trial and error. "Whenever you feel tired, we'll take rest," said Money. "We've only just started out," said Granny. "We'll rest when you're hungry." They walked at a steady pace, without talking too much. A flock of parrots whirled overhead, flashes of red and green against the somber sky. High in a spruce tree, a barbet called monotonously, but there were no other sounds except for the hiss and gentle patter of the rain. Money stopped to pick up wild berries from a bush. Granny wasn't fond of berries and did not slacken her pace. Money had to run to catch up with her. Soon his lips were purple with the juice from the berries. The rain stopped and the sun came out. Below them the light green of the fields stood out against the dark green of the forest, and the hills were bathed in golden sunshine. Money ran ahead a little. "Can you see all right, Granny?" he called. "I can see the path and I can see a white shirt. That's enough for just now." "Well, watch out, there are some mules coming down the road," warned Money. Granny stepped aside to allow the mules to pass. They clattered by, the mule driver urging them on with a romantic song. But the last mule veered towards Granny and appeared to be heading straight for her. Granny saw it in time. She knew that mules and ponies always preferred going around objects if they could see what lay ahead of them. So she held out her open umbrella, and the mule cantered round it without touching her. "Poor mule," thought Granny as she hurried after Money. "Perhaps it needs glasses too." They ate their lunch on the roadside in the shade of a whispering pine. There were chapatis and mango pickle, and a curry made from yams. They drank from a spring a little further down the path. By late afternoon they were directly above Nain. "We're almost there," said Money. "I can see the temple near Raju uncle's house." "I can't see a thing," said Granny. "That's because of the mist. There's a thick mist coming up the valley." It began raining heavily as they entered the small market town on the banks of the river. Granny's umbrella was leaking badly, but they were soon drying themselves in Raju uncle's house and drinking glasses of hot, sweet, milky tea. Money got up early next morning and ran down the narrow street to bathe in the river. The swift but shallow mountain river was a tributary of the sacred Ganges, and its waters were held sacred too. As the sun rose, people thronged the steps leading down to the river to bathe or to pray or float flower offerings downstream. As Money dressed, he heard the blare of a bus horn. There was only the one bus to Missouri. He scampered up the slope, wondering if they'd miss it. But Granny was waiting for him at the bus stop. She had already bought their tickets. Chapter 4. The motor road followed the course of the river, which thundered below, where another bus had gone off the road a few weeks back. The driver appeared to be unaware of the accident. He drove at some speed, and whenever he went round a bend, everyone in the bus was thrown about and the luggage skidded on the floor. In spite of all the noise and confusion, Granny fell asleep, her head resting against Money's shoulder. Suddenly, the bus came to a grinding halt. People were thrown forward in their seats. Granny's glasses fell off and had to be retrieved from the folds of someone else's umbrella. "What's happening?" she asked. "Have we arrived?" "No, something is blocking the road," said Money. "It's a landslide!" exclaimed someone, and all the passengers put their heads out of the windows to take a look. It was a big landslide. Sometime in the night, during the heavy rain, earth and trees and bushes had given way and come crashing down, completely blocking the road. Nor was it over yet. Debris was still falling. Money saw rocks hurtling down the hill and into the river. "Not a suitable place for a bus stop," observed Granny, although she couldn't see a thing. Even as she spoke, a shower of stones and small rocks came clattering down on the roof of the bus. Passengers cried out in alarm. The driver began reversing the bus. More rocks came crashing down. "I never did trust motor roads," said Granny. The driver kept backing until they were well away from the landslide. Then everyone tumbled out of the bus. Granny and Money were the last to get down. They could see it would take days to clear the road, and most of the passengers decided to return to Nain with the bus. But a few bold spirits decided to walk to Mussoorie, taking a shortcut up the mountain, which would bypass the landslide. "It's only 10 miles from here by the footpath," said one of them. "A stiff climb, but we can make it by evening." Money looked at Granny. "Shall we go back?" "What's 10 miles?" said Granny. "We did that yesterday." So they started climbing a narrow path, little more than the goat track, which went steeply up the mountainside. The area of the landslide was left behind, but there was much huffing and puffing and pausing for breath. And by the time they got to the top of the mountain, Granny and Money were on their own. They could see a few stragglers far below. The rest had retreated to Nain. Granny and Money stood on the summit of the mountain. They had it all to themselves. Their village was hidden from them by the range to the north. Far below rushed the river. Far above circled a golden eagle. In the distance, on the next mountain, the houses of Mussoorie were white specks on the dark green hillside. That's it for today. End of part 2. Part 3 will be in the next video. Goodbye. What a wonderful day to read a book. So, let's start. Getting Granny's Glasses, Part 3. From Chapter 5. "Did you bring any food from Raju uncle's house?" asked Money. "Naturally," said Granny. "I knew you'd be hungry. There are pakoras and buns and milk sweets and peaches from your uncle's garden." "Good," said Money, forgetting his tiredness. "We'll eat as we go along. There's no need to stop." "Eating or walking?" "Eating, of course." "We'll stop when you're tired, Granny." "Oh, I can walk forever," said Granny, laughing. "I've been doing it all my life, and one day I'll just walk over the mountains and into the sky. But not if it's raining. This umbrella leaks badly." Down again they went, and up the next mountain and through the fields and over bare wind-swept hillsides, and up through a dark, gloomy deodar forest, where a band of monkeys followed them until Money gave them what was left of his pakoras. And then, just as it was getting dark, they saw the lights of Missouri twinkling ahead of them. As they came nearer to the town, the lights increased until presently there was a brightly lit bazaar, swallowed up by the crowds of the shoppers, strollers, tourists, and merrymakers. Missouri seemed to be a very jolly sort of place for those who had money to spend. Jostled in the crowds, Granny kept one hand firmly on Money's shoulder so that she did not lose him. They asked around for the cheapest hotel, but there were no cheap hotels, so they spent the night in a dharamshala adjoining the temple, where other pilgrims had taken shelter for the night. Next morning at the eye hospital, they joined a long queue of patients. The eye specialist, a portly man in a suit and tie who himself wore glasses, dealt with the patients in brisk but kind manner. After an hour's wait, Granny's turn came. Chapter 6. The doctor took one horrified look at Granny's glasses and dropped them into a wastepaper basket. Then he fished them out and placed them on his desk and said, "On second thought, I think I'll send them to a museum. You should have changed them years ago. They've probably done more harm than good." He examined Granny's eyes with a strong light and said, "Your eyes are very weak, but you're not going to go blind. We'll fit you up with a stronger pair of glasses." Then he placed Granny in front of a board covered with letters in English and Hindi, large and small, and asked her if she could make them out. "I can't even see the board," said Granny. "Well, can you see me?" said the doctor. "Some of you," said Granny. "I want you to see all of me," said the doctor, and he balanced a wire frame on Granny's nose and began trying out different lenses. Suddenly, Granny could see much better. She saw the board and the biggest letters on it. "Can you see me now?" asked the doctor. "Most of you," replied Granny, and then added by the way of being helpful, "There's quite a lot of you to see." "Thank you," said the doctor. "And now turn around and tell me if you can see your grandson." Granny turned and saw Money clearly for the first time in many years. "Money!" she exclaimed, clapping her hands with joy. "How nice you look! What a fine boy I've brought up! But you need a haircut and a wash and buttons on your shirt and a new pair of shoes. Come along to the bazaar." "First have your glasses made," said Money, laughing. "Then we'll go shopping." A day later they were in the bus again, although no one knew how far it would be able to go. Sooner or later they would have to walk. Granny had a window seat, and Money sat beside her. He had new shoes, and Granny had a new umbrella, and they had also bought a thick woolen Tibetan pullover for Money's father, and seeds and bulbs for a cow and a cowbell. As the bus moved off, Granny looked eagerly out of the window. Each bend in the road opened up new vistas for her, and she could see many things that she hadn't seen for a long time. Distant villages, people walking in the fields, milkmen on the road, two dogs rushing along beside the bus, monkeys in the trees, and most wonderful of all, a rainbow in the sky. She couldn't see perfectly, of course, but she was very pleased with the improvement. "What a large cow!" she remarked, pointing at a beast grazing on the hillside. "It's not a cow, Granny," said Money. "It's a buffalo." Granny was not to be discouraged. "Anyway, I saw it," she insisted. While most of the people in the bus looked weary and bored, Granny continued to gaze outside of the window, discovering new sights. Money watched for a long time and listened to her excited chatter. Then his head began to nod. It dropped against Granny's shoulder, and it remained there, comfortably supported. The bus swerved and jolted along the winding mountain road, but Money was fast asleep. How exciting! We finished the story. Hope you come back for more videos on Mibary, the library of everything. Goodbye!